This episode of the Essential Oil Revolution is brought to you by SamanthaLeeWright.com. So if you want to learn more about your host, Samantha Lee Wright, you can go over to my website that's mostly about childbirth and pregnancy at SamanthaLeeWright.com. Pregnancy is the happiest excuse for feeling like total crap. Unknown.
Empowerment and education, two powerful elements that will help you break free of convention and transform your passion for wellness to a level beyond the status quo. The Essential Oil Revolution, where you're given the tools to supersede an ordinary everyday lifestyle. Inspiring speakers, DIY recipes, healthy living tips, and more. You'll discover it all here. So tune in and get ready for a wellness revolution. For show notes and more, go to revolutionoils.com/podcast.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Samantha Lee Wright, and you're listening to the Essential Oil Revolution, the pregnancy episode. So I'm super excited to finally be able to put this episode together for you all. Now, instead of me just coming on and blabbing away about essential oils and pregnancy, which I could easily do forever, I decided to get a little help with this episode and invited a very special guest. Her name is Vanessa Merton, and she does the Pregnancy Podcast. So if you haven't been tuning in and you are expecting, you should definitely tune into the Pregnancy Podcast, available on iTunes, Stitcher, and everywhere else you can listen to podcasts. Vanessa does a great job on the show, and she goes over a lot of really amazing information for expectant parents out there. So I have her joining us on this show, and she's going to help me sort of reel it back a bit and help me figure out what are the most important questions to answer for you all out there that want to learn more about using essential oils for pregnancy. We're going to share some great recipes. We're going to share about essential oils to help with the most common problems that can come up during pregnancy. And we may even have time to get into childbirth a little bit as well and how to use your oils for that. So I'm super excited to welcome Vanessa Merton onto the show. But before we do, let's quickly pull a recipe out of our DIY dugout. This recipe is for a relaxing foot soak because we all know that pregnant ladies need a lot of help with their feet. So relaxing foot soak comes from Harper. Thank you for submitting this, Harper, who lives in Asheville, North Carolina. So you simply add 3 drops of a lavender essential oil and copaiba essential oil into about 1/4 cup of Epsom salts. Take the salt and add it to warm water in a foot basin and soak your feet for about 20 minutes. Well, that sounds super great. Thank you, Harper. If you want to submit your own recipe to the dugout, simply email us at revolutionoilspodcast@gmail.com. All right, here we go, revolutionaries. I'm so excited to be sharing this episode with you all and to have this very special guest to help me get this information to you. I've got on the phone Vanessa Merton from the Pregnancy Podcast, and she's going to help me figure out the best questions that you need to know if you are expecting and want to learn more about how to use essential oils. So welcome to the show, Vanessa. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on, Samantha. I am super excited too. I don't know a whole lot about essential oils, so I'm really excited to hear what you have to say on all of this.
Yeah, me too. Well, I could probably go on for like 5 hours on the topic, so I'll try to reel it back, and that's kind of why I need you here, because I think if you weren't here, I'd probably just go on and on forever. So I'm glad that you're gonna kind of reel me back and make sure I cover what everyone really wants to know. But quickly, do you want to give people just a little bit more background on you and your podcast and what you do over there?
Sure. So I host the Pregnancy Podcast, and that's just a free resource to help expecting parents navigate all of the craziness that goes on with pregnancy and birth and being a new parent. So I started podcasting about the end of September of 2015. So we're a few months in. in, and new episodes come out every week. And each episode's focused on a specific topic related to pregnancy, birth, or being a new parent. So we really get to dive deep and get into detail on a lot of different things.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic. I'm loving the show, and I'm sending a lot of my childbirth students and my doula clients over your way to listen in. And it's just so helpful when they have all that information, just ready to go and listen to on their time. It's so nice. So thank you for what you do over there.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, where should we start?
Well, I would kind of like to know a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into maybe being a doula and then got into all of this stuff with essential oils.
Well, let's see where to start. So I became a doula and a childbirth educator actually before I was even thinking about having kids. I actually wasn't really sure if I wanted to have kids or not. I've never really been a baby person, so it was just a really nerve-wracking idea to me, and I wasn't sure. But at the same time, I've always been so fascinated with just learning and that empowerment that comes from learning about yourself and your body and just taking control of your health. So as a woman, I suppose I just started learning about my body and realizing that, oh my gosh, I've grown up for this long not knowing this kind of stuff, just like simple stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know this basic stuff. And that just sort of put me down a path of really learning about women's health. And then of course that tied into childbirth as well. And just, learning about natural childbirth and about home births and women that are delivering their own babies. It just became this really eye-opening experience for me and really transformational. I love this concept of giving birth versus being delivered. And that's something that really has stuck with me, that a lot of women, I feel like, the terminology that we use and the feelings that we have, especially when we go into the hospital to give birth, is very much like someone's delivering my baby, right? And my midwife or my provider or my doctor's delivering my baby, versus this kind of concept that you're giving birth. And it kind of sound like a play on words, but to me, it's much more of this philosophy of, if we take charge and take control of our own experiences, then just that psychology of what happens during pregnancy and during childbirth completely changes and can really lead you into becoming a much more empowered mother in the end as well. So I love the education part of being educated, taking control of your experience. And so that's sort of how I became really interested in childbirth and became a doula, but specifically helping parents with hospital births, because I live in North Carolina. I don't know about you, but in North Carolina, home birth is not legal, or at least for the midwives to be practicing. So even though there are sort of some workarounds and there are some different ways that you can have a home birth in North Carolina, it's not very easy. It's not always accessible to everyone. And so there are a lot of women that really maybe wanted to have that sort of home birth experience, but couldn't. And so, are delivering in the hospital, but they're very nervous about that. And they still want to have that sort of home birth feeling behind their birth. So that's sort of what I do. I try to help parents have hospital births that feel like home. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with education, kind of getting them to know the different inside tips and tricks to how to navigate the hospital system. And then also coming from this space of compassion for them and also for the providers and the hospital staff, because everyone's just there to help. And so just kind of teaching people how to go into the hospital without feeling like they have to have like fisticuffs up, and put on a fist fight with anyone, and make them really relaxed and comfortable with that experience.
That's awesome. I think so many people feel like birth is this very black and white thing, that you're either having a home birth with a midwife or you're going to do it in a hospital with all these interventions. And there are so many shades of gray. You have so many options, when it comes to birth, and you can certainly create any experience you want as long as you are educated and prepare for it. So that is really cool that you are helping so many parents navigate having a a natural birth or whatever type of birth experience that they want to create in a hospital setting.
Something I tend to tell my students a lot. I forget where I heard this, but someone said this once, that your only choices in childbirth are not between an unnecessary cesarean and an orgasm in a hot tub.
That is absolutely true. That's funny. I like that.
So anyway, that's how I got started with childbirth, and it's truly my life's passion. I love working with parents and really empowering them to have that journey and have that be their journey. Now, how I got started with essential oils is kind of funny because, even though I knew so much about pregnancy and I knew so much about childbirth before I actually became pregnant, well, by the time I became pregnant, I was like the worst pregnant woman ever. I was this stereotypical, like so sick, total morning sickness, achy all over the place. And, so even though I had all this education, all those little tips and tricks that I would tell my clients to try to help them through that process were just not working for me. And it was kind of really this eye-opening experience. I think it's sort of like when people that teach parenting classes before they have kids, and then they have kids, and then they keep teaching parenting classes, and they're like, just forget everything that I used to say.
Yeah, definitely. Having gone through the experience definitely gives you a view from a different perspective on everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, none of the things that I was trying were working, and I've always been really into herbal remedies, and that used to look a lot like teas and tinctures and things like that. And it just wasn't working for me. And maybe not so much because the herbs weren't working, because I do feel like plants and natural remedies do have such a power and are very effective. But I was so sick that I literally couldn't stomach them. I could not drink my raspberry leaf nettle tea anymore. I couldn't do it. It would make me so nauseous, and I couldn't take the taste of it anymore. So that was just really challenging for me. And it wasn't until halfway through my second pregnancy that my good friend Becky Webb introduced me to Young Living and essential oils. And I just never really made that connection before between herbal plant medicine and essential oils. I kind of thought essential oils were just for cute DIY craft projects or perfumes, or really just for the smell. And she sort of explained to me, like, well, a lot of essential oils on the market are just for smells and just for perfumes, but there are a very small class of essential oils that are specifically made for therapeutic use. And she kind of introduced me to that world. And that was just so eye-opening for me. And then it became just this fascination for me, because it was such an easy go-to for anything. I didn't have to drink anything. I didn't have to make anything. I could just literally open up a bottle top and, put it on my skin, put it in my diffuser, or maybe drink it in a tea. And it was just such an easy thing for me to do. So I felt very empowered and really capable to handle anything that came my way. I would just kind of go to my oil shelf and be like, all right, let's try this for that. And I'd never seen anything work so quickly and so effectively. It was really eye-opening. And then at that time I was pregnant, I stopped taking doula clients, and I sort of slowed down with my birth work, and I had all this time to kill, and I don't really do nothing very well. So I became really fascinated with the oils. And since I was taking a little break from my birth work, I really dove into the essential oil world. And now they just blend together so well, because to me, my birth work and my work as sort of a health guide for the essential oils is really all about just putting the power of whatever you're going through back to the person who's going through it. So if you're going through a health struggle, if you're going through pregnancy or childbirth, I'm all about just giving you the tools that you need to make those decisions for yourself and give you the resources for you to do that. And so the essential oils just tied in really well to that. And now I use them with my clients and teach a little bit about them in my classes, and they just go together well. And it's been so much fun.
Yeah, well, I am so excited to really get into how you can use essential oils during pregnancy and birth today. And I know that so many people that listen to my podcast would love to hear this too. So I think the very first thing I would want to ask is, are essential oils safe to use during pregnancy?
Yes, and that's probably the most common question, and it's kind of hard to give a strict answer because it really just depends on a few factors. So the short answer is yes, but there are just a few caveats that people need to be aware of. The first caveat is that because essential oils are so potent, we like to give this comparison that 1 drop of peppermint essential oil is equivalent to about 28 cups of peppermint tea.
Wow.
Yeah, so very strong and they're very potent. So it's not to say they're unsafe, but we just have to sort of respect their potency and not overuse them. So especially if you're very new to essential oils and you've never used therapeutic grade essential oils before, you don't want to start from scratch and say, all right, let me drink 10 drops of peppermint oil. You want to start out really slow, build up your tolerance, and just respect that they are very potent. So usually you only need 1 or 2 drops of an essential oil for it to do its job, and that's it. So that's a very important caveat. And, I always tell people just to listen to their bodies. And that's the most important thing. I think that our bodies are very intelligent, and your body will tell you if you are doing something that's not good for it, right? But a lot of people don't trust themselves in that. But I try to tell people to just listen to your body. If you start using an essential oil, first of all, start out slow, but even if you're going slow, if you're feeling nauseous, if a rash develops, if you're just feeling off, and these things very rarely happen, but if they do, just slow down, listen to your body, maybe change the oil that you're using or check that you're using a good quality oil. And that's sort of my third caveat is that quality is key. This really can't be overstated. I don't want to harp too much on this, but it's important to understand that it's estimated that about 96 to 98% of essential oils on the market right now are adulterated in somehow. So that's either that they're diluted down or they're maybe wrongly identified, like they're not correctly labeled with what species or botanical name that plant is from, or they're tainted with chemicals, or they're just flat out completely synthesized. So a lot of essential oils, the cheaper ones, aren't even directly from plant sources. They're just synthesized in a laboratory somewhere to smell like that plant source. Like lavender is a really common one for that. So it's sort of like the difference between like a synthetic vitamin C versus like a plant-based prenatal vitamin C. It's going to act very differently in your body if it comes from a plant source versus a chemical source. And so that's very true for essential oils. But sometimes it's hard to know what's pure and what's not. And unfortunately, you can't always trust the label. So even if a label says 100% pure therapeutic grade essential oil, well, there's really no defining regulatory agency that's taking control of this. Since it's not a medicine, it's not sold as like a drug, then there's really no way for companies to regulate this. So anyone can really slap anything on their label and call it pure. So that's kind of tricky, but a few red flags, a few ways you can try to tell what's real and what's not is make sure that it has the Latin name or the species name on the bottle. So if you're looking at a bottle of lavender, it should say the full botanical name and not just lavender. So it's important to know the source and where it's coming from. So like lavender, there's over 30 known species of lavender, and they all have different chemical profiles and they all have different medical uses. The most common one that we know of is English lavender, and the full name for that is Lavandula angustifolia. Now that's a total butchering of the pronunciation, I'm sure, but that's the one that's most commonly used for therapeutic purposes. But then there's other types of lavender. There's one type called lavandin, which is a different species name. It's Lavandula intermedia. And this is not what people think of as English lavender or real lavender. And they might smell very similar, but they're very different therapeutically. So like the lavandin only contains between 7 to 12% of camphor, which is actually really harmful to use on burns. But true lavender, or the English lavender, is really fantastic for burns. So I've heard a lot of horror stories where someone will learn like, oh, lavender, it's really good for burns. And then they go out and buy some cheap lavender that's really lavendin, put it on a burn, and turn their second-degree burn into a third-degree burn or something like that. So that's when it gets kind of tricky, especially when you consider that it's much cheaper to manufacture synthetic oils, or much cheaper to manufacture like lavendin versus lavender is a lot cheaper, because you get 3 times the amount of essential oil from lavendin versus the same amount of plant from lavender. So a lot of companies will market lavendin as pure lavender, which is technically true because it's the same Latin root name, but not the species is completely different. So, and then you get into people saying like lavender causes estrogen imbalance in boys, and that's totally untrue. It's actually the lavendin that will do that. So, bottom line, you just really need to know your source really well, use your best judgment, and be willing to experiment. And if it's not working, because essential oils do work, you hear these amazing stories of people getting these amazing health benefits from them. So they do work, but if they're not working for you, you just need to make sure you're getting it from the right place and that you're using the right type of essential oil. So that's kind of the gist of it. Is that totally confusing, or is that sort of cover it for you?
No, thank you so much for going and explaining all of that. I can certainly see why, especially when you're pregnant, you'd want to be really careful that you are getting your oils from a good source, and that what's in the bottle is actually what the label says and what you think you're using it for.
Yeah, exactly.
So are there any particular oils that should be avoided during pregnancy?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot of research done on this to back this up, and it's all sort of guesswork on the part of different professionals' opinions. So in the end, it's really just sort of opinions that we have. I think it's really interesting to note that there has never been a reported case of fetal demise, fetal deformalities, or really any sort of serious negative reaction that has been linked to a pure therapeutic grade essential oil. So there's no case studies or cases that we know of that we can link those sort of really serious reactions to. So in general, essential oils are very safe. Now, there is a list of certain essential oils that are generally agreed upon to be avoided. And so there's a couple: basil, cinnamon bark, wintergreen, sage, Idaho tansy. Lavendin actually is not considered safe in pregnancy because it does tend to increase estrogen levels. So that's when you got to be really careful, right? Because a lot of the lavender on the market is actually lavendin, and it's just marketed as lavender. So that's kind of an interesting one to take note of. There's quite a list, and I have a free list actually. So if anyone is pregnant and wants to know which essential oils they should be avoiding and which ones are 100% totally safe to use, then you can just download my free cheat sheet. It's super easy and totally free. If you want to get that, it's at samanthaleewright.com/be safe. So Samantha Lee Wright, it's LEEWRIGHT.com/be safe. And I've got that free cheat sheet for you. And if you do sign up for that, you'll also receive my top recipes to be used in pregnancy and postpartum as well. So I won't spend any more time going over the entire list because it's a little bit lengthy, but it's you can get that yourself and reference that at any time.
Perfect. Yeah, I will definitely have to download that list and take a look at it. In the beginning, you talked about kind of how you got into essential oils during your pregnancy is because you were dealing with just terrible morning sickness and some of the remedies that you were trying weren't working. So can you kind of get into how some essential oils could be helpful with some of the common symptoms that pregnant women deal with?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. Essential oils are just so good for your body in general. Like whatever your body needs, the essential oils are so good at providing what it needs for you specifically, which is really cool. If you start to study the science behind essential oils at all, you'll learn that essential oils are very adaptogenic. So what that means is, if I put lavender on me and it might do something completely different in my body than if you put lavender on you. Because essential oils like lavender, for example, has, I think, over 400 different chemical constituents in it. And so all those different chemical constituents kind of go in and they figure out what your body needs and gives you that support where you need it most. So it's really cool the way that the oils work in our body. And I feel like when we give the body the support that it needs, then it's able to really take care of itself. So another reason that essential oils are so beneficial during pregnancy is simply the fact that they can help us avoid a lot of the toxic chemicals that might be in our home. So I don't know about you, but like when I was pregnant, I became this sort of heightened aware of the chemicals around me and almost to a paranoid level, which I don't think is very uncommon in pregnancy. What about you?
No, I completely identify with that. And I think so much of that is your body just, I mean, it's like this instinctual thing that, you're suddenly way more careful about everything that you're surrounded with and everything that you're putting in your body. I think that's just almost like a protective mechanism that we have when we're pregnant and protecting and growing this little human.
Right. It's such a responsibility. And yeah, that biological reaction that happens of wanting to protect that growing baby is so strong. And there's this study I find so fascinating that the average American home contains over 63 hazardous chemicals.
Whoa.
Which is a lot. Yeah. I mean, and just think about what's under your kitchen sink. What do you clean your toilet with? What do you wash your hair with, or deodorant? There's a lot of chemicals that we're surrounded with in our home that we're just used to because that's what we're sold to in the stores. And so we trust it. But a lot of that stuff can be really damaging to your health and damaging to a growing baby. So essential oils are just a really easy and fun way to help you avoid some of those common chemicals that are in your home. So that's one way that they can be really helpful for that. Another way that they can be really helpful in general is that essential oils are known to be super high in antioxidants, and they're also super immune boosting. So most of the essential oils are going to boost your immune system and provide you with a ton of antioxidants, like off the charts. If you compare it to things like blueberries and pomegranates and things like that. So just giving yourself that extra boost of antioxidants and give your immune system that extra boost, I feel like in general is just such a great thing to do for you and to do for your baby.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, your body is working so hard and working overtime just with all the developing going on and all the growing you're doing. And I can definitely see how giving your body some tools to just keep your overall health up would be so beneficial, especially during pregnancy. To know. So when you were dealing with morning sickness, was there a particular essential oil that you found really helped with that?
So I actually did not get introduced to essential oils until the second half of my second pregnancy, which I find super ironic, right? But so most of my morning sickness had sort of passed by then. So I can't give straight up testimony to this. I can only give sort of what I've researched and what I've learned. But it's interesting if you look at what causes morning sickness. It's usually caused by a number of different things. One is just hormones, and then the other is maybe an overtaxed liver or some sort of blood sugar imbalance. So it's sort of like this symphony that's going on, and you don't necessarily know what's causing yours so much. And if you are having morning sickness right now, my heart goes out to you because it's so difficult and so debilitating. But everyone is different. And so everyone's going to kind of have to find what works for them. But in general, here's sort of some go-tos that you can try. So peppermint. I cannot say enough amazing things about peppermint essential oil. It is just the most soothing essential oil for your digestive system. It's just so soothing. And I've actually used it a lot when I would get car sick. So even if I was pregnant or not, if I was in the car, I live in the mountains, so we have a lot of curvy roads. And so if I would get car sick, I would just put a drop of peppermint oil right on my tongue. And it was almost immediately really soothing to my stomach. Now, I don't recommend that everyone go straight to putting peppermint oil straight on their tongue because it does take a little bit of tolerance to build up to that. Actually, my husband can't handle it. He's like this big, strong guy and he can't handle peppermint oil on his tongue. He's like, how can you do that? But to me, it's so soothing to do that. And peppermint also is really great for promoting healthy bowel function. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So I know that can be a really common issue for a lot of pregnant women, is just really having that digestive system slow down. So peppermint oil can be really, really great for supporting that system. And you can just take it in tea, put it in empty gel capsules. If you do that, you can just add a couple drops of olive oil to that empty gel capsule, and that'll help it assimilate in your body really easily. Another really great blend for digestive issues is there's a Young Living blend called Digize or Digize. It's like Digize. And that's a mixture of a lot of digestive oils like ginger, fennel, things like that. I could not survive without Digize. Really, it's just such a great tool to have, especially now that I'm breastfeeding. Actually, I can't really tolerate a lot of peppermint oil when I'm breastfeeding because it tends to decrease my milk supply. And this is kind of funny because we have a private support group in our Revolution Oils team for our members. So if you become a member, you can come and ask all your questions in our private support group. And no one else has had this problem except for me. So I think I just have a really sensitive body type. So I can't overdo the peppermint when I'm breastfeeding. But so I'll use the Digize instead for very similar kind of situations. So those would be my go-to. And then, to just help with the blood sugar, balance, because that can be a really big cause of morning sickness, is just having that blood sugar drop all of a sudden. So to help you maintain that healthy blood sugar, there is one product. This isn't necessarily a straight up essential oil tip, but there's one product called Ningxia Red that we just recently did an episode all about on the show. And that has really been shown to be a very powerful support to healthy blood sugar levels. So I would, keep some of that around at all times. It makes such a world of difference. And just being really conscious of your diet. Diet is so important when you're pregnant, and it can be really difficult to eat what we really need because we've got all these cravings and all these aversions. But in general, if you can sort of eat a low carb diet with lots of vegetables, that can really help you maintain those healthy blood sugar levels. And then there is one more essential oil tip for sort of helping regulate this healthy blood sugar, and that's called Ocotea. It's Ocotea. So Ocotea essential oil, if you apply that to your lower back, so just mix it with a little bit of coconut oil or whatever sort of carrier oil you want to use, mix it with the Ocotea and apply that to your lower back and see if that helps, and maybe make like a little roller bottle of that and put it beside your bed in the morning. So you always hear that tip of putting crackers or some sort of snack by your nightstand in the morning. I say put your little crackers or whatever, but also have your roller ball of Ocotea and roll that on your lower back first thing in the morning and see if that helps.
Those are all great tips. And I think, it's probably going to be a little trial and error and try some different things and see what works for you. If you are dealing with nausea or morning sickness, and like you said, gosh, my heart goes out to women dealing with that. I know that it's not very much fun at all. So there's just so many symptoms I feel like that come up during pregnancy. What about aches and pains? And especially, I know back pain can be a big issue as your ligaments are getting looser and you're carrying around more weight. Is there an essential oil that can be helpful for that?
Sure. So yeah, aches and pains during pregnancy can be very common. Some of my favorite essential oils just to help with sort of relaxing of the muscles. And they're really cool because they can really penetrate really deep down into the muscles. One of my favorites for that is a combination of copaiba essential oil and peppermint essential oil. And you would definitely want to dilute those oils and put them directly where you're feeling like you need the most help. So on your hips or on your back, mix that with the carrier oil. And some people even say to layer it. So put the copaiba oil on first and then go on top of that with a layer of peppermint oil. And that helps it kind of drive it in even deeper into your body. So those are some of my favorites. There's also, this isn't an oily tip, but I just really advocate for chiropractic care during pregnancy. It can be so helpful for that kind of thing. And it's also really great for promoting optimal fetal positioning as well, which is something that we don't have time to talk about, but it's something I'm very fascinated with and love teaching my clients about how to promote that optimal fetal position for pregnancy and labor. So I'm really advocate for chiropractic care. And I also really advocate for exercise balls. So I don't know if you've had an episode on your show about those yoga balls or exercise balls for birth, but I just swear by them. I give them to all of my students and all of my doula clients, and I have them encourage them to sit on that as much as possible in pregnancy, and that can really help.
Yeah, that's great. I think where I want to get you on my show to talk about the optimal fetal positioning, because I think that's something that could be so beneficial for women to learn more about and not a topic that's talked about too much.
Oh,
So
I would love that.
we'll definitely have to get into that topic on detail over on the pregnancy podcast. But that your suggestion for the copaiba and peppermint oil is good for aches and pains, and especially back pain. And of course, hormones pretty much rule everything when you're pregnant. You can pretty much blame any pregnancy symptom that you have on hormones. And a huge thing that they impact is kind of your moods. And, that roller coaster of highs and lows, especially in the first trimester, I feel like it's so common. What about essential oils to kind of help with some mood swings?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. They can be intense, can't they?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, this is going to be, really different just depending on who you are and what your body needs. So I always recommend experimenting with different ones. But my go-tos, my first recommendations would probably be frankincense is definitely one of my absolute favorite oils for any sort of emotional swing that you're having or mood swing you're having. Frankincense just has this instant effect on our bodies and calms us down almost instantly. So I really relied on frankincense a lot, especially in my postpartum. So my immediate postpartum, like that first week, I think it's very common just to be going through a lot of different mood swings because your hormones are just all over the place. And I remember one morning just waking up and feeling just completely out of myself. That feeling of like, I don't even recognize myself right now. I just feel so out of my body. And so I just sort of fumbled my way over to my oily cabinet and opened up and put some frankincense on my outer ears. So the outer ears is a really great place to apply essential oils for any sort of emotional issues. Also the inner wrist. So that's kind of your rule of thumb, outer ears and inner wrist for emotional issues. So I would put the frankincense on my ears or on my wrist and just immediately felt human again, and just kind of sat down and said, whew, all right, I can do this. Where's my baby? Time to feed it. And that was really helpful.
Wow. And I think so many women, we spend so much time preparing for pregnancy and birth that we often overlook the postpartum period. And you're right, there's huge drops in hormones right after birth. So those first few days, plus you're not sleeping much and you have a new baby that's going to be very, very demanding. So I can really see how frankincense could help just kind of make you feel like yourself and maybe even out your moods a little bit in the the postpartum period, especially in the first few days.
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing about essential oils too is that you should really feel it almost instantly. So, the way that the essential oils work is we breathe them through our olfactory nerves, and these nerves are connected directly to the limbic system of our brain. It's one of the only methods we know of that can reach the limbic system of our brains, which is where the emotions come from. That's what controls our emotions. And so they have almost this instantaneous effect on our limbic systems. So it kind of takes a little bit of the guesswork out of it. So you don't have to be like taking something and wondering, I wonder if this is helping me. It's, you should really feel a difference within the first like 30 seconds of using an essential oil when it comes to these emotional issues. Now, when it comes to more of the physical stuff, that can take a lot more time. But when it comes to just calming down and finding that emotional balance, you don't really have to guess so much, because if you use it and you don't feel any better, then move on, try something else,
Right.
But that's something that's really great. One oil that I know a lot of women will use, especially for breastfeeding, they'll just sort of keep it next to their breastfeeding station, or throne, as I like to call it, is there's a blend called Stress Away. So it kind of does exactly what it's called. It just is so calming. So that can be really great for pregnancy and postpartum. Everything, just any way to lower your stress levels, lower those cortisol levels, that Stress Away blend is really great for that. And I've used that one in labor as well, just to keep everything really calm. And that's a mixture of vanilla, copaiba, lime, one other one as well, but it's one of my favorite smells. I just love it. Oh, and the citrus oils too. So those are probably my top 3 recommendations for different moods: frankincense, Stress Away, and then any sort of citrus oil like orange, grapefruit. The citrus oils are just very, very uplifting. So those days that you're just feeling so tired and fatigued and moody, and especially if you've got another kid bouncing off the walls and you just don't know how you're going to get through the day, just walk over to your diffuser, put a little bit of citrus oil in there, maybe some lemon, maybe mix it with some lavender, hit that button, and then boom. It really makes such a difference in your day.
Great. Well, those are all great suggestions. And I like what you said about the Stress Away. I am still breastfeeding as well. So I'll have to try that and put that next to my throne.
Yeah. Well, it can really make that experience a lot more enjoyable, and I mean, to me, breastfeeding is so enjoyable and I love it, but especially in those beginning weeks and months when you're still learning and you don't really know what you're doing, it can be really stressful. So just sort of using that tool of an essential oil or something to just help you calm down and help you slow down and enjoy that experience can be so helpful.
Yeah, no, that is great. So another, I guess, kind of symptom, for lack of a better word, of pregnancy that is kind of a scary one is the dreaded stretch marks.
Ah, yes.
So, which, nobody wants them. I think from the researching that I've done, it's about half of women end up with stretch marks. Is there anything or any type of essential oil that women can use to kind of help with that?
Absolutely. All right. Here is my favorite skin concoction. So essential oils in general are just super great for your skin. So here's my recipe for magic belly rub. And I'm not going to promise that it's going to totally prevent you from getting stretch marks or anything like that, but it is just super good for dry skin. And the oils within it have been shown to decrease wrinkles or even reverse the effects of scarring and things like that. So there's my magic belly rub. You just take a quarter cup of coconut oil, 4 tablespoons of cocoa butter, 4 teaspoons of sweet almond oil. So those are all the carrier oils, those first 3. And then the essential oils, just add to all those, mix in with all those carrier oils, 6 to 8 drops each of frankincense, lavender, and there's a blend called Gentle Babies that Young Living makes that's like perfectly formulated for skin care in pregnancy. So that's my magic belly rub recipe, and I hope you all enjoy.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, sorry, I'm just kind of running through my list of pregnancy
No, you're
symptoms.
fine.
So, I think that when I was pregnant, I pretty much had like a stuffy nose throughout my entire pregnancy, and your mucous membranes tend to kind of swell up a little bit as your body's increasing blood flow to your uterus and all these other areas. Are there any essential oils that can kind of help with some respiratory support and that you could use for that?
Sure. And I definitely have a lot of experience with this one. So, in general, one of the most powerful sort of trios of essential oils that we can use that just overall just kind of work for anything and support your body in so many different ways is the combination of lemon, lavender, and peppermint. So those three oils used together, or maybe just keeping them in your system, so good for anything really, but especially for respiratory support. And I've felt this a lot. I deal with a lot of respiratory issues. So in pregnancy, I really struggled and needed a lot of that extra support. So those three oils, and then of course, any sort of eucalyptus. And there's about 3 different species of eucalyptus that are common in the essential oil world. I think any of them will do. So eucalyptus, lemon, lavender, and peppermint. Just keep that running in your diffuser, or make a roller ball, or just slap it on the bottom of your feet, whatever. Just get it on your body. It'll help.
Oh, that's great. And then how about fatigue, which, I mean, that's usually pretty intense, I think, in the first trimester and can kind of creep back in the third trimester as your baby's birth gets closer. Is there something that women can use to kind of help combat fatigue?
Yeah, so peppermint, again, you can tell why it's one of my favorites, is just such a great oil. It's just such a stimulant. It really wakes you up. And it's a really common one for athletes to use as well, during exercise or before, a big competition or something like that, because it just is really stimulating. It wakes you up and you can really feel it. So any long road trip that I go on as well, I keep peppermint by my side for the car sickness and for the alertness that I need. And then the same with lemon. So those two together can really wake you up. It's funny. There's my husband and I, we tend to take turns sleeping in on the mornings, on the weekends. So like he gets to sleep in Saturday and I get to sleep in Sunday. And there was one day I was kind of new to essential oils and I was very excited. So I wanted to get up and go to the bathroom and then put on the diffuser before going back to bed because it was my turn to sleep in. And I'm always very good at falling back asleep, but I decided to put in lemon and peppermint because it just sounded really refreshing. And after just breathing it in for about 30 seconds, I literally could not fall back asleep when it was my turn to sleep in. And I was a little bit upset about myself.
Oh. So it definitely works then.
Yeah, definitely. But the fatigue, I think, is also really linked to poor sleep, which I think a lot of women can deal with in pregnancy, is just really struggling getting that good sleep. And that's another thing that essential oils can be so helpful with. So I won't talk about this too long because we did have an entire episode dedicated to essential oils for sleep. But I'll quickly say that my favorite sleepy time blends are lavender, cedarwood, and vetiver. So vetiver is sort of an acquired taste. Not a lot of people will like the smell of it. I love it. But in combination of lavender, cedarwood, and vetiver, it really knocks me out. But everyone's different. So like my husband, Chambé, that mixture doesn't really work for him so much. But there's one blend called Peace and Calming that just knocks him out so quickly. So you kind of have to find what works for you and grow a connection between that oil during your pregnancy. So if you're able to make that connection in pregnancy with certain oils, then you'll be able to use them in your childbirth as well, which can be really helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point to kind of, if you develop this relationship with these oils over the 9 months or so that you're pregnant, I can see how your body would really be receptive to them using them in birth. So, Samantha, do you want to get into at all how oils could be helpful during labor and birth?
Yeah, I would love to. I think maybe for time's sake, I'll just go through it kind of quickly, and then maybe we'll do another episode sometime to cover it more because there is kind of so much to talk about. But I'll just talk about the oils that I tend to use the most with my clients, and then also the ones that I used in childbirth as well. But first of all, I just want to say that I kind of said this when I was talking about sleep, but forming that relationship between the oils in pregnancy is really key, because if you've never used essential oils before, the first time you use them should not be in childbirth. You don't really want to introduce anything new in childbirth. You want to have that relationship sort of formed already and see how your body reacts to it. But there are a couple oils of note. The ones that I always keep in my doula bag are clary sage and myrrh. So those are ones that you would actually want to avoid in pregnancy because they are known to sort of strengthen contractions and stimulate the uterus a little bit. So if I have a client that's having a very slow labor, then I might pull those out. Now, in general, I tend to be very hands-off and I like to let birth do its thing. So I don't just automatically go to those oils for every birth. I kind of wait until there's sort of a reason to use them. But clary sage and myrrh, very stimulating to the uterus. So you can apply those straight to the lower belly, to the abdomen area, or you can put them on the inner ankles. And those sort of pressure points, wherever the same points you would use for pressure points in labor, that's where you could put the essential oil, the clary sage and myrrh. And then jasmine as well. Actually, for jasmine, you only need to inhale it aromatically to be able to stimulate labor and encourage labor to start. So maybe if you're dealing with maybe post-dateism or your labors just doesn't seem to want to kick it into high gear, then you can put some jasmine in the diffuser and see if that helps. And then there's some oils, when we talked about oils for like muscle relaxing and aches and pains, there's a couple oils that you want to avoid during pregnancy, but I figure in childbirth, you're about to have the baby. So there's not really a lot of time for it to have any negative effects on the baby. So that's when I'll pull out like the wintergreen. The wintergreen is so powerful for just relaxing the muscles. So wintergreen, peppermint, there's a blend called Deep Relief and Panaway. Those oils I almost always use on my clients if they want me to. So I'll put them on the shoulders or on the low back, that dreaded low back ache in childbirth. Yeah. So the wintergreen can be really, really helpful for that. And then just emotionally too. So in childbirth, I'm sure you talk about this constantly on the show, just the importance of staying relaxed and trying to not be fearful, keeping the body in this sort of state of peace and acceptance. And that's so important. But it's kind of hard to do for a lot of women. So we have lots of different tools that we can use. We have a lot of different comfort techniques. We use water, that kind of stuff. But the essential oils can also be a really helpful tool for that as well, especially if we've formed that relationship already with them. There's one blend that Young Living's really famous for, and it's called Valor. And Valor, they call it courage in a bottle because it just gives the body courage. There's really no better way to put it. It's blend from a mixture of herbs and spices that the Vikings would use before going into battle, or soldiers would use before going into battle. They would use this blend of herbs to sort of strengthen their courage. So that's where Valor gets its name. And so I think for certain women that are very fearful of that birthing process, the Valor blend can be so helpful to just put a drop on your heart or on your wrist and really help you find that courage that you need. And Stress Away as well. So Stress Away was one that I used in childbirth, and I'll just never forget. It's so amazing how the connection between smell and memory is so vivid. So now every time I use Stress Away, it just brings me back to my second birth with my daughter, Layla, and it was just such a beautiful experience. And I remember the Stress Away just helping me through my transition so well.
Yeah, that sounds like something I could have maybe used during labor. But gosh, I can definitely see how we can stay here talking for days about how essential oils could be so amazing for pregnancy, labor, and I mean, we haven't even gotten into postpartum stuff. That's probably a topic for another episode, but thank you so much, Samantha, for sharing all of this stuff. You answered so many of my questions, and I'm sure some of the questions that a lot of women who are pregnant would have, and maybe this will help some women not be so intimidated about using essential oils and really get a better idea of how they could be such a positive tool to have in your toolbox for pregnancy and birth.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm all about, is just having as many tools around as possible. And to me, I think essential oils are just one of the most fun tools that we can use. So that's why I love them so much. Well, thank you so much for kind of guiding me through and helping me formulate which questions would be the most beneficial for everyone. And I'm so glad to have gotten to spend this time with you on the show. This was so much fun.
Well, yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for inviting me on, Samantha.
Thanks for tuning in, Revolutionaries. And if you are pregnant and listening to this episode, I hope you found it really helpful. And I hope, like Vanessa said, it helps you not be so intimidated by using essential oils in pregnancy, because they are such a powerful tool for you to use, and they can be really fun. And you don't need to be scared. You just need a little bit of guidance. If you do want to learn more about this topic in general, I've got a lot more information on my website that's separate from the podcast website. And my birth website is just samanthaleewright.com. Lee is L-E-E, Wright is W-R-I-G-H-T. So if you want to learn more about sort of what I do over there with childbirth, I've got some essential oil information on there as well. You can download that free cheat sheet that I was talking about that lists out all of the essential oils that are considered safe and unsafe to use during pregnancy. And that can be found at samanthaleewright.com/be safe. If you do download the free cheat sheet, that gets sent right to your email. And then also from there, you'll receive some of my best tips for using essential oils in pregnancy. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, to another great episode of the Essential Oil Revolution. Keep on learning, keep on discovering, and most importantly, keep on treating yourself well. You are worth it.